Now, full disclosure, I did remove the portion about the Russian nerve gas, as I feel like it doesn't really play into our strategic themes, which we like to tackle here on The Big Con. I appear to have your attention based on the fact you haven't closed your mouth in the past 30 seconds.
I'm getting excited. Hello and welcome to The Big Con, the podcast where we use the benefit of hindsight and a healthy dose of schadenfreude to look at where businesses took a misstep that had an impact on either their profit, their brand, or something much more dire. Hi, I'm Emily, Harvard degree candidate.
I am Dale, business nerd.
Strategy isn't just for the big players, so no matter what size business you work on, tune in as we learn through the failures of the poor souls that have gone before us.
Now bear with us as we may be a bit tired because we've been working hard, A, on the research of these episodes, and B, because we're now on YouTube. So apparently people like to watch podcasts. I don't know who these people are, and if you are watching us, hi, and we encourage you to reach out. It is the second biggest search engine in the world, so we thought we'd definitely get ourselves up there and get our faces up there. I've done my hair today in preparation. Now, Emily, I mentioned the research, so it's my turn today to do a bit of a story, a bit of a narrative.
It is. I'm excited. I literally know nothing. Normally, I at least know the name of the business, but I don't even know anything today, so I'm really excited.
Which is funny because I scoffed from my high horse when you said that. And I had known a little bit about them. I was not prepared for the scandal, for the hijinks and the shenanigans.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Today we're looking at a company called Wirecard. It's a tale of German unicorns, whistleblowers, journalist intimidation, missing billions, fugitives, jail sentences that play out over a really exciting 20-year period. Now, full disclosure, I did remove the portion about the Russian nerve gas, as I feel like it doesn't really play into our strategic themes, which we like to tackle here on The Big Con, applying those strategic themes for small business or any business, really. I appear to have your attention based on the fact you haven't closed your mouth in the past 30 seconds.
I'm getting excited.
Let's head back to 1999. The Matrix comes to cinemas. Excellent movie. Britney Spears releases her first album. Everyone is terrified of Y2K. The euro is introduced to the European Union, and Wirecard is born. It's a .com darling focused on internet payment services, which is another name for moving money around on the internet, which is a vagueness that will become really important as we dive into this story. I'm going to introduce our first character. His name is Jan Masalek. He's described as a bit of a tech wunderkid. He comes on board to Wirecard to help their big transition to mobile. He's already spun up an e-commerce platform beforehand, so he has the expertise. He's got no formal qualifications or training. There's a story of him accidentally routing the company's internet traffic through his computer, like his personal computer in his office, rather than the actual server room, which you'd think would actually get him fired, but no, he doesn't. He's already so integral to this company. He's almost like he's latched in, he's got his octopus tentacles into Wirecard, and he's crucial to their success. Over the next 10 years of Wirecard's growth, his devotion to the cause is quite admirable. So admirable, by the age of 29, Jan Masalek is actually appointed the COO of Wirecard. An incredible rise. A CEO at age 29 of a big company. And I'm going to tell you how big this company gets as we go into this. It may make you wonder why Jan Masalek is now a fugitive, running from the law, expected of having suspected nefarious ties to Russia. And when you Google his name, you're only going to see his most wanted poster. But, as I often do, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to 2002 and to Wirecard. Unfortunately, like many .com darlings at the time, it's not doing too well. People may remember pets.com. Was this meant to be the biggest thing ever? It wasn't. And many .com companies that came out in that .com boom disappeared entirely. Wirecard is then bought, because it's failing so bad, by a fella who needed a payment solution for something that's not that savory. Porn. Which there is a demand for because people want to pay for porn at this time. And Wirecard has the means, remember, moving money around on the internet. Around the same time, there's a KPM graduate. So KPMG is one of the big accounting firms. It's often known as something quite prestigious. Marcus Braun. He enters the scene and he takes the reins as CEO at the time. So he's taken this startup effectively. He gives up some cash, so he puts a bit of equity in. That's how bad the business is going at the time, that the CEO needs to pay to be a part of it. But we'll get into that. He does a big old restructure, and he continues kind of sailing for those blue ocean markets and doubling down on the online transactions.
Wait, can I just confirm? So Wirecard is its own entity, right?
Wirecard is effectively a startup at the time, and the startup was really good at doing e-commerce. They had this mobile transaction element. It was actually really hard for pawn businesses to do an online payment solution because banks wouldn't support them. Commonwealth Bank's not going to put their hand up and go, yes, sure, don't worry, we'll send you some terminals. So they were able to provide the means to be able to do this. It's actually probably a pretty good key differentiator that Wirecard was able to do at this time. They established a pretty good foothold by doing this and servicing a really underrepresented market, namely pawn and also gambling. So that's the other blue ocean strategy.
Just like really those highbrow...
Just the good stuff, mate. If you Google Braun, the current CEO, he's taken some wardrobe cues from a few other startup tech founders. Steve Jobs, he's got the black skivvy going on. Elizabeth Holmes. There's lots of keynotes of him waving his arms around in the air, talking about the future of payments and how Wirecard will use all its excellent tech stack and reams of financial data and artificial intelligence to change the world. Full credit to Wirecard. It's a gap in the market and something that some of the more prominent players usually try to avoid, like I mentioned. High-risk, underserved markets don't often get a lot of love. Bank of America is not going to really sort them out. It's not good for their reputation. There's lots of legal restrictions. A lot of fraud that happens in that environment. But that does not stop Braun and his team. There is an issue around these blue ocean strategies. There's often things like pirates or risk solutions.
Before we go on, do you want to explain just in one sentence what a blue ocean strategy is?
I just thought we'd keep saying blue ocean and you wouldn't pick me up on it. But for me, my interpretation as not someone studying at Harvard, a blue ocean strategy is something where you go to because there's nothing out there at the moment, or there's opportunity to jump in and make some money or extend your business in that area because there's nothing else out there. How'd I go?
It's just satisfying a need that isn't currently being satisfied by anything else on the market, or satisfying it in a new way. Like taxis and Uber satisfied it in a new way.
Wirecard has actually had to develop a lot of specialized solutions to kind of manage this fraud and navigate those risks. Things like they acquire companies in other countries that have fewer legal restrictions and they route their payments through there, et cetera, et cetera. They had plenty of other loophole exploiting endeavors. Example, America brings in laws against taking bets online. So Wirecard buys a company that specializes in payments related to online poker, which in their definition is a game of skill, which is still technically allowed under that new law. Bing, bada, boom, 62% revenue increase for Wirecard that year. So they were able to kind of maneuver in, fill those loopholes. The mentality was dripping capitalism. If someone wants to sell something, Wirecard was there to provide the means to pay for it. The riskier the asset, the more they could actually charge for the process, the payment solution. Now we're in 2005. And through some fancy governance work, aka a reverse IPO, and I'm going to quote Financial Times journalist here who uncovered the whole Wirecard shenanigan, because it is a shenanigan, but he described a reverse IPO beautifully. Like a parasite devouring its host from the inside, Wirecard is injected into a corporate shell and it emerges to walk the stock market in its place. So it's not pretty much the difficult process in which a company may list on the stock market, but it effectively goes in through another company who already has a place in that stock market. And just like that, Wirecard ends up on the German stock exchange. And the thrusters are on through colossal global expansion. Europe appears to have its first tech darling on its hands, and the financial elite and Germany's political powers love it. There's anecdotes of Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel helping get a deal over the line with China, cashing in favors with President Xi Jinping. It was a crown jewel, or, and I'm sorry for any German listeners, a Das Prunkstück in the German economy, which means it was pretty good and they were loving it and they wanted it to succeed. So Emily, why now, when you type in Wirecard and you go to the website, are there messages about insolvency proceedings? Why is a Wirecard scandal ranked higher as a Wikipedia entry than the standard Wikipedia page for Wirecard?
Tell us all about it.
First up, common risk of blue ocean strategies. There's usually a reason why it's so blue. It's pretty hard. Those sweet pawn dollars, they were drying up, well, because pawn was actually now free. And so people didn't need to pay for it anymore. And those loopholes that we're talking about, they're also being closed as quickly as they were opening. In one instance, this translated to the US government charging a man linked to Wirecard for laundering over $1 billion in 2010. At that time, that knocked off 30% of the stock price. Terrifying. All in all, it appeared that it was time for Wirecard to change its model. They were still focused on payment solutions, but maybe they were going to do something and try go at it legit. And so they changed from focusing on Europe and America, and they're like, you know what, Asia, let's go there. That's where our new blue ocean might be. And so over the next 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, Wirecard builds and builds and builds. In 2010, it sits at about $9 on the stock market on that German stock exchange I mentioned. And through what I will put in strongly inverted commas, which you can only experience on our YouTube, growth quadruples its stock price to $40. They're reporting billion-dollar profits. It's all amazing for Wirecard. It's the European PayPal. Everyone wants it to succeed. As I mentioned, it is the Das Prunkstock. I'm so sorry for any of our German listeners.
Chef's kiss. Perfect.
Now is an excellent time to properly introduce Financial Times journalist Dan McCrum. He's credited for bringing the whole Wirecard shenanigan down, which I hope is not a spoiler. A lot of this kicks off in about 2015, the year that Dan McCrum releases the first Financial Times article with a salacious title called Inside an Accounting Scandal, or The House of Wirecard. It's a blog series.
This is giving me Big Review TV sort of vibes with the Financial Review bringing them down.
Big Review TV is small stir fries in the context of what this is. You remember that focus on Asia I spoke about?
Yeah.
Well, from reports, it was working. It was amazing. I mentioned all the growth. The revenue and profit margins were so phenomenal in Asia compared to anything else that Wirecard was doing. So how did they do it? Through the power of what is described as oddly structured deals. Now, remember what I said around everyone wanted Wirecard to succeed. There's actually a lot of pressure for them to succeed. When there's pressure, there may be justification to maybe overinflate just how great you're actually doing, even when maybe you're not. So how do you do that when you're a publicly traded company and you need to have your books audited regularly and show transparency about where your money is coming from and where it's going?
Don't tell me they paid people off.
Oh, much more elegant. Hey, you guys said you made $1 billion this year. Where is it? Oh, you see, we bought some businesses because we are growth focused and those businesses were very expensive. In fact, we paid $300 million for one, but they didn't. The money never actually went to the seller. However, there was a record of it leaving Wirecard's wallet. But the report says that roughly 30 million of it actually only went to the seller.
Wait, can you say that again?
Wirecard never had the money, but they're reporting that they made profits, and the reason those profits aren't in their bank account. They're like, oh no, it's because we bought a company.
Oh, right, we bought something else.
Yeah.
So that, can they show, where are they showing proof of that asset? Or surely the auditors are wanting...
They've got the proof of how much they paid for it.
Oh my God.
The Financial Times continues its kind of vlog series, which interestingly puts a bit of a target on Dan's back. He's suspected of actually colluding with the short sellers, trying to bring down Wirecard. So short sellers are someone who really want a stock price to fail and to go down. They'll make money if the stock price tumbles. You remember the GameStop shenanigans from last year? So how could this German darling be doing wrong? And the story is effectively lost in a noise of, no, you're wrong. And the legal pressure builds and blatant intimidation. They're photographing Dan around and following through the London Tube, etc., etc. It gets pretty nasty. There's much better articles and resources that I'll link to in the show notes that go into this, but it's quite interesting. And I find it so fascinating that there's clear evidence and reporting of really bad behavior that is met with a sentiment of, nah, don't worry about it. A, from the stock market, but B, from the German government at the time, or the German financial regulator. 2017 rolls around. Wirecard is still growing, it's still going on its growth path. They've bought a prepaid card business from Citigroup, something that's horrendously salacious in itself, allowing you to move thousands of dollars around almost unseen because you loaded up a card with no name on it and you spend it somewhere else. Oh, also, and this is really important, Ernst & Young, their auditors have given them a big green tick. So they're another auditor company, and they've said, actually, the cash flow is fine. It's looking quite good. They've seen some screenshots of bank statements, and they're happy with what they've seen, and the investors love it. The stock price soars. Wirecard is close to becoming a real household name.
Oh my God.
2018, where it gets very spicy. The Financial Times
is so recent.
I know. It's a wonder it didn't hit us more.
Yeah.
In 2018, Financial Times has not actually quit its onslaught. And this time, Wirecard actually have to pay the piper. So they've actually got something that they can't ignore. They fall on their sword and they're made aware of some really bad behaviors in their Singapore headquarters, where a lot of the Asian growth is coming from. They found a practice called round tripping. Remember all those different companies that Wirecard owns? Company A sells an asset to a company B for $1 million. Then company B sells that same asset for, say, $1.1 million. Then both companies record the transactions as separate sales. Revenue is up, but no value has actually been created. This is the way they did this by all these effectively different companies that they owned. Horrendous, Wirecard says, and they launched an internal investigation to stamp out this horrible behavior. Investors actually remain quite ignorant to this, and they rally Wirecard even further to a market cap of $28 billion. To put that into context, it would place Wirecard in the top 15 companies in Australia. Wild.
What?
This also allows Wirecard to enter the DAX 30, a stock market index consisting of 30 major German companies on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. It's a big deal, it's very prestigious. And remember Braun, El Capitano, Mr. CEO, his infusion of cash, all those years ago, to save the dying company is now worth an astonishing $1.6 billion. He's doing all right.
Woof. Yeah.
Remember that little internal investigation I mentioned? They found the guy who was running his own little professional development sessions. That's what the whistleblower said, around how to rot the system, down to this is how you write the fake invoices. The board has quashed the investigation, so don't worry about that. And in fact, at one point, sometime after the investigation, Dan McCrum rings up the Singapore office to check if the man who they knew was running these development sessions and was effectively blamed for a lot of the bad behavior was still working. He was fine. The board has bigger fish to fry, and they're asking for a $900 million cash infusion from SoftBank. SoftBank invests in a lot of tech companies. They were known for in WeWork, another famous failure. The reporting continues from the Financial Times. Your business is nothing but lies, they cry. False, yells Wirecard. Oh, and also the Federal Financial Supervisory Authority is yelling the same thing. Leave our unicorn alone. So that's the German financial authority. You are clearly manipulating the stock markets for your own good. There's no way that they can be doing wrong. Marsalek, as I mentioned, is putting a lot of pressure on journalists and the short sellers, and they're having them followed and intimidated, as I mentioned. The house of cards is really beginning to fall. The Singapore government and the police really get quite tired of this, and they're like, listen, we need to investigate what's going on. They raid the Wirecard office, it's plastered over the news everywhere. The share price falls below $100. Now, this is the bit I love. Financial Times can identify that most of the businesses or the payments come through a few partner companies, one in the Philippines. So the Financial Times journalists head over to the Philippines to find where this head office is. And all they find is a small rural family. It's like a fisherman and his wife. And they had zero clue about this multi-billion-dollar payment company of which the head office is meant to be there. And then one of them finds a random document with a Wirecard letterhead, and it shows a balance of €30. It was all a sham. I find the periods of 2019 and 2020 genuinely fascinating because the Financial Times is throwing accusation after accusation on Wirecard, and they're just fighting right back. In fact, they're so bulletproof that they're thinking about buying Deutsche Bank, one of Germany's largest bank.
Yeah.
And people are quite confident that it will happen.
What?
Interestingly, if they were actually able to get through that and buy that bank, it would probably effectively hide all their horrendously flimsy balance sheets disappearing tonight. It was a bit of a Hail Mary.
What that might have done to the German economy.
And I think you hear about so much of these startups who just run as hard as they can on a lie or in a bit of overinflation, hoping that at some point the gap's going to close.
Yeah.
They're about to enter the final act. Those few partner companies, apparently they're all pretty much duds. The profits that Wirecard are reporting are fraudulent. The auditor was given misleading information, or very much kept separate, or given enough information to do what they need to do, but they're happy to prove it. They want to really squash these rumours, and so they bring in another auditor, KPMG, and surely this will be the end of it. Wirecard can walk away victorious. It is the end of it. They're not walking away victorious. In April 2020, KPMG finished their report and said, we cannot verify whether the lion's share of Wirecard profits is genuine. So pretty much 5 years of all their profits, they're like, mate, where's your money?
Yeah.
All gone. And in fact, it's 1.9 billion is the big number that they cannot find anywhere. It's just completely disappeared.
$1.9 billion just gone.
Just gone. Probably never existed.
Jeez.
By June of 2020, Marsalek is suspended, Marcus Braun resigns, and is actually soon arrested and is currently undergoing court trials as we speak.
I mean,
acknowledging
sure.
he claims that he's a victim. There's a lot of blame put towards Marsalek. I don't think we'll actually ever know just how much Marcus Braun knew about what was happening in that situation. Wirecard files for insolvency, and just like that, the unicorn is slain. Marsalek, he's copying a lot of blame for this in post, and a lot of the books and Netflix documentaries and podcasts that are coming out speaking about this. He's legged onto a plane in the Philippines, and his most recent sighting was somewhere in Russia at this point. I think even a month ago, they found out that his grandfather was a Soviet spy. And so there's lots of dodgy stuff about Marsalek that's come out after the fact. A lot of the assumption is that he was to blame.
But if you're a CEO and you don't know that your chief operating officer is moving money around, you're not really that in touch, and you're not really managing the business in the way that you should be.
Which sounds very much like lessons learned, which is something we'll definitely do after the break. So let's take 5, have a think, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back, everyone. Emily.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I'm overwhelmed.
Are you amazed that this wasn't in our news cycle as much as...
I suppose we're not so much into the German zeitgeist as we are, say, the US or the UK. If you told me that there was a huge accounting scandal in Italy or Greece and I didn't know about it, I'd be like, sure, yeah, I suppose that checks out. But it is wild because it was so global. Yeah, so it is very interesting.
There was a desire for it to succeed. This is where a lot of these startups get themselves stuck, is that they release their stock price and they've got 10% growth. And if the next year or the next time they update, they're not releasing at least 10% growth, then the perceptions go down and the investor confidence goes down.
That was one of the things I sort of was thinking about when I was listening to this, is that especially when you were talking about the government protection that it received, like from the German government, I think it's so interesting sometimes when like government or big corporations or big investors back a horse, like sort of what happened with Elizabeth Holmes. They back a horse and none of them want to back down because they're all like quite successful investors or governments that have made a decision that they're going to be held accountable to by the people in their community. And, you know, they made a wrong decision to back this horse. And so it just had too much protection. So it was allowed to grow in ways that perhaps it shouldn't have. But I think one thing that I'd never considered, and I don't know if this might be a thing, but it was just something, a thought that occurred to me while I was listening to this story, is obviously when you start a business, the intention is not to be fraudulent. The intention is to be successful. And we assume our listeners
don't want to do the same thing.
Right. So it's interesting, and we talked a little bit about it in the Volkswagen episode, it's interesting how it gets to be a fraudulent business, and what's the steps sort of in between that we're going to create this business that's going to make it easier for people to send money online. Great idea. PayPal's done it, and they've done it securely and properly.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? And for me, I wonder, because you did say that it started in industries like gambling and pornography that traditionally have fraudulent or suspect behaviours in the way they do business, that they have to skirt the law because there's like very strict laws around it, and they have to find loopholes and they have to do all of that. So I wonder whether, because that's the area that they decided to, and I'm not coming down on the pornography or gambling industries.
It's money.
Obviously, it's problematic, and we do need some protection for some people involved in those industries. But I wonder whether because this business started by having to deal with industries that had those behaviours, it then became a culture within that business just because of the exposure. Like when you think about politics, for example, you might have people, like politicians, who decide to go into politics because they have very pure ideals and they want to create a better world and all of that. But that becomes tainted quite quickly because you realise you can't be a player in the game unless you're playing the game that everyone else is playing.
Yeah.
Then it's not that big of a jump to go from shady dealings with your clients to shady dealings internally. It's like, it's not a huge jump. So people might not have even flagged it. And this is just pure conjecture.
In any environment, regardless of what you're doing, it's around ensuring that you foster a culture of integrity and ethical behavior.
Yeah.
And I think we saw this a lot with the banks, is that a lot of what when the big banking review came in a couple of years ago in Australia, there was a lot of behaviors didn't benefit the customer and then ultimately were toxic to the bank environment. And there's commentary around the general Wirecard office being a bit frat housey, particularly in that porn and gambling days, but that's where it was. And so if that's where your foundation's built, when you're growing, you need to kind of take stock and go, hang on, are we the company that we need to be right now? When we're dealing with huge amounts of money and we want to be seen as a world leader, as a world player.
Yeah.
I think there's ultimately the role of the CEO to be able to do that. I think that's what you said quite nicely around it. Even though old mate Marsalek may have been pulling the strings, if that culture of integrity was across the company, I think that would have been less of an issue. Let me get on the soapbox for a second around skivvy wearing individuals. Not the Wiggles, but there's a lot around the magic of the reality perception filter that Steve Jobs was credited for, to gloss over things. And I think we've spoken before around toxic positivity and just kind of like, yeah, be the best, we're going to keep going, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Which is fine if you do have those underlying culture, again, of integrity and ethical behavior, and you're doing it the right way. And I think when you're growing that fast and that rapidly, those core tenets aren't as dangerous.
I think as well, like we talked a lot about blue ocean strategy in this episode. It's how a lot of unicorns become unicorns because they've found an area of the market that is not serviced or underserviced, and they fill up that space and grow rapidly through that. There is a risk to blue ocean strategy, though, which is worth acknowledging, because there's risk to everything. You can't have this is a strategy and it's gonna work. And I feel like our listeners probably have figured that out. You know, like there's never a time where there is no risk here. Go sail on to the blue ocean.
No sure things. Yeah.
No, and so the risk with blue ocean strategy is that you're constantly looking for the next blue ocean. So you never solidify yourself into a market. You're always chasing that high. It sounded a little bit like that's what they were doing, looking for the next blue ocean and looking for the next thing, because there's always going to be a blue ocean, but it might not be for you. You have to look at your business and your model and what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you might see a blue ocean and be like, geez, that'd be really good to dive into because I reckon there's a really good market there. But then you look at what you have to offer and you go, you know what? That's going to be too expensive, or it's not going to be right. Someone else can have it. Someone else can find it who has the right assets and resources to be able to address it.
The diversification of your business and client base, you can do that as long as you have a strong foundation. If your strong foundation is based purely on blue ocean, that's not actually built with rigor and something to leap off. And that's kind of the trap they got into, to keep growing and keep reporting incredible profits and incredible revenue.
That's a really good point as well. But it's that thing where it's like, no, I might be able to actually achieve my goals before someone finds out that I haven't quite done it.
And the thing that they tried there with the Deutsche Bank, like trying to buy that, was like, if we just jump in here, they'll never know that our Excel spreadsheets are all lies.
For our listeners who are like, well, I'm not fraudulent, I'm not chasing my own tail,
I don't have Russian nerve gas at my disposal.
Exactly. I think we've all been in a meeting or been, workshopping something where we've gone, yes, this is a great idea, this is so good. Oh, there is that thing, but we can think about that later. That if we become big, then we'll address that. Then we don't need to worry about that. You always need to worry about it. And I feel like I'm always that voice in the room. You've worked with me, Dale, as well, where I'm like, no, I think we do need to. It's so annoying. And I'm like, no, I really do think that we need to acknowledge that this could be a problem in the future before we base our entire foundation on something that, because once you pull a string as well, sometimes you don't actually know how big of an issue it actually is. As annoying as it is when you're, on a high because you've got this great idea, you have to drill down into those risks and those possible future problems and have at least a thought about how you might address it if and when it arises.
And I'll finish on our most sexy point The sexy lesson of this: strong corporate governance is crucial.
Oh, stop it.
The fact that they were able to hide all these fraudulent activities for years was likely due to a lot of the weak corporate governance. And when that was set up deliberately, and there was the shell company kind of environment and transparency on silos, or whether it was done through, again, that kind of growth stage, which they grew too quickly, couldn't keep up what they needed to do, was behaviours of them having different auditors that were effectively siloed between each other, and so they would get individual green ticks. And being able to show, oh no, this company's fine, it's rock solid, don't worry, and you're relying on the words of the other company, and that, yeah, they're fine as well. When you're getting these people on board to help and do the right thing, make sure you're being as transparent as you can, prioritizing those strong controls and having that transparent communication right across your team so that these things may not actually occur. Wirecard.
Yeah, big one. Loved it. Great one. Loved going into that blind because I was like, wait, what?
Polkas.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and we hope when sailing the blue ocean, you avoid pirates in the future. If you want to learn more for your business, head over to our website, thebigconsultingagency.com, and sign up to the mailing list to hear news about workshops and stay up to date with the new episodes. Don't forget to also follow us and rate us on your podcast app, as well as on YouTube now. Thanks so much, Dale. Really enjoyed it.
No problem at all.
Bye.